What is going on, everyone? GR Weekly, episode 5, here for September 17th. Matt McCarthy here, your host, talking about a little bit of Thursday night football recap between the Washington football team and the New York Giants. And we're previewing the 6 remaining 4 p.m. and prime time games. So 7 games to talk about today. I want to for sure start off with what I thought was a beautifully terrible football game. I liked this Washington Giants game, but it was interesting in some regards. So let's really just dive into it before we preview the remaining 6 games for the week. One big thing on both sides of the ball was really looking at the quarterbacks, right? Was Daniel Jones going to have an implode spot here against what I thought was going to be a strong defensive front from the Washington football team? And Taylor Heinicke, what was he going to look like now that he is going to be his team for at least 6 to 8 weeks? And I thought both looked very good. Daniel Jones did a lot of work on his legs, a lot of run option plays that he took advantage of Washington really biting hard on Saquon Barkley, taking those carries. And Taylor Heinicke, I thought he looked very poised. I only had the one mistake late in the game. I don't really think that's on him. I don't know why they're passing that situation to begin with. Just run the ball or kill the game. That's what you really want to do. But starting on the New York Giants side, really good for Daniel Jones not turn the ball over. I do think he needs to get the ball out of his hands a lot quicker. For him, it just seems like he's trying to find one option when the ball is hiked, whatever his main look is on a play. If that option is covered, I think he gets a little worried that he now has to go and make other options and holds on to the football a little too long, taking some unnecessary hits. Just throw it 10 rows into the stands. I think it's a little bit better for your team to just be throwing the ball away, get out of your hand. Don't take the sacks. Try and limit those situations where you're possibly putting your team in a detriment just because you can do other things and he's trying to do too much because he's under the gun. The whole team is, another, season where they're starting off 0-2. They've been in a very bad spot for the last 7 years or so with only one season, really them having over double-digit wins. So it's really going to be another long road possibly for the New York Giants, but I don't know if particularly it's all on Daniel Jones's shoulders for that. But Saquon Barkley was definitely the talk of the night over on the Giants side. I don't like that Barkley had more carries of a loss than carries of 5 yards or more. I do like that he did have that 41-yard carry, shows that he still has the explosive speed and the possibility to make plays more than what the offense is allowing him. I don't like that he, though, had less than 4 targets in back-to-back weeks. He did not have that a single stretch of both the 2019 and 2018 seasons. Something I was really looking at. He's no longer getting those dump-off sort of passes that you see them just kind of like scanning the field like, okay, Barkley, just stand there. Here, you take the ball, go run for 5 yards. That's where you pick up a good amount of fantasy points on the cheap. If he's not getting those sort of looks, that's a problem because I think he's going to get healthier and healthier as the season goes on. This was supposedly a tough matchup for him going into the game. So he'll come away with A, not getting more injured. Great. B, looking fine enough for what the offense is allowing him to operate as. But if he's not being a big receiving threat, that's something I think needs to be addressed with Jason Garrett and this New York Giants offense. Because back in his rookie season, was he a good rusher? Of course, but he caught, 80, 90 balls. And that was something that we were hoping he could possibly do in this now fully 2021 season. Does have the Atlanta Falcons next week, New Orleans Saints after that, and then the Cowboys. So at the very least, if you're worried about Saquon Barkley, you have a good stretch of games coming up where he can prove himself. New Orleans Saints, I still believe, is a tough defense to crack on the ground, but the Cowboys and the Falcons especially are not situations where I'm really overly worried about him. I know some people are saying, who would you rather have rest of the season? Guys like Antonio Gibson, Najee Harris, Joe Mixon. I still prefer Barkley to all of them. I'm still considering him a top 5, 6, 7 sort of running back. Wherever you kind of had him in the preseason, I think you should still carry that sort of inclination over, especially in these first 2 weeks, because there is some, odd stuff happening with this team, especially in the receiving group. I did think it was a little funny, though. We were overly, worried about what Saquon was doing. The New York Giants ran the ball more than the Washington football team in this game, 28 times to 22. Washington, I didn't think this game played out the way they wanted it to. This could have been a low-scoring sort of drag fest, and it became a much higher-scoring game than I really thought. Both teams scoring over 25 points was not something I thought, with Washington winning 30 to 29. Moving on to the receivers, though, I'm not settled on Kenny Gallia being a bust, being a bad draft pick. He was already kind of dinked because of his injury and his new team, home here with the New York Giants, with the money being paid, with the idea of what he can do when he's fully healthy and acclimated to this team. I do think on a short week, him being a bad option, I ranked him quite low going into the week regardless. So there was a lot of options I think you could be playing over him no matter what. And we talked about that in the preview. Kenny Gallia came in as my wide receiver 37. So really outside of all the flex considerations that I would be comfortable with you starting, me looking, with going into this game, I said, hey, no need to really go and start Galladay, and most people weren't really doing so. I think we in full PPR around 7 fantasy points or so, which I'm pretty happy with considering that I said he was a sit for this week. Sterling Shepard, though, as much as I want to say pump the brakes on Kenny Galladay, Sterling Shepard, I'm ready to move up my ranks for sure. Definitely looking like one of those late rounds or undrafted receiver options that we now need to get in some consideration of him being in that top 36 at the very least. Only 2 games in this system with, Garrett and Joe Judge with under 6 targets. So 28% target share through 2 games to start off the 2021 season. Like that quite a bit. Darius Slayton, on the other hand, it's unfortunate that he didn't come down with that pass. It was a little bit outside of his grasp. Can you make the argument that he should have come down with it and caught that ball? Of course. But to me, I don't want to give him, he got very harshly reamed out by Joe Buck. So it's I don't think it was really completely his fault, just a little bit of his grasp. But what are you going to do? Over onto the Washington side, Tyler Heinicke, 12 passes of 10 yards or more and 17 of 39 completed passes through 2 games. That's 44% of his have gone for 10 yards. So we're getting Ryan Fitzpatrick in just a younger version here with Heinicke. I like this a lot. I like that we're getting the gunslinger type flair out of him. I really like what I saw in terms of being comfortable in the pocket. I do think there's a little bit of situations where his actual spiral on his ball, and it's not really anything to make too much about. I didn't think he had a lot of crisp overall throws. There was some on the replay where it's like, it's kind of a funky pass slipping out of his hand. That's not really anything we're going to be really, really giving too much of discredit for. It helped Terry McLaurin set a career in reception totals for him. We actually have 2 career games out of this. McLaurin in receptions and McKissick in receiving yards. And we're going to naturally go into the running backs now because Antonio Gibson was running pretty well last night. 5 carries of 5 or more yards. Really, in the 3 of those went for 10 yards or more, but they don't have him on the 2-minute drill. They don't have him in the hurry-up offense. If all these snaps are going to McKissick, especially with a goal line out of a timeout, they went to McKissick, just an easy walk-in. The Giants defense, for some reason, stacked the right side of the Washington football team's offensive line, and McKissick's like, I'll just go left, and he scores easily. Those are somewhat concerning, especially after coming off a career high in carries in week 1. Is it a Thursday night situation? Is this a game where they were not able to actually play the type of offense they wanted to? Because they were slightly inconsistent. They had 3 3-and-outs and only 4 sustained drives of 11 or more plays. So you had drives being over very quickly, and you have drives going on very long. Not much of really what was going on in the middle. So it might be just a little bit of an awkward game for them, but I do like what I saw out of McLaurin, especially. Antonio Gibson, I don't think is, further than that top 12 sort of kind of guy we thought. Maybe some people were not hoping this being stuff for McKissick eating into his top 5 possibility, but I do like what I saw out of him as a player. I'm not going to give too much of a short week early on in the season. Running backs getting their touches spread out like this in the first few weeks isn't particularly a terrible thing. Get everyone acclimated to both, taking contact like this, the NFL speed, everyone getting up to, real playing shape and ready for NFL work, especially with the additional game this year. And nothing really too far out of favor in that regard. A little bit annoying with the touchdowns. McKissick scoring, Ricky Seals-Jones scoring, Darius Slayton scoring. We would have liked this to go to some of the other guys in this game. Not going to, hold that against Logan Thomas. Thought he was in a good spot as well to score in this one, but it was just kind of an odd game that they kind of got lucky in the coming out the win no matter what. But moving on, previewing the games now. Yeah, I get some water. Atlanta versus Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is favored by 12.5. One of 3 games that have a 10 or higher spread on the week. 52-point over/under. Starting with the Atlanta side, one big thing, if Gallman is indeed active, how does a snap work look like in a terrible matchup? Because I am not recommending Mike Davis as a start this week. I am a big Mike Davis guy, but after we saw the Dallas Cowboys basically abandon the run game altogether in week 1, I don't recommend a team in the Atlanta Falcons who weren't able to really get it overtly off and running in week 1 against, I thought, a little bit of softer matchup in the Philadelphia Eagles, with a team I still respect defensively, at least up front. If they're going to really do anything against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they should do so through the air, like we saw in that Dallas game. So cornerback Sean Murphy-Bunting is already out with the shoulder injury sustained in week 1. And Carlton Davis is now questionable with a hamstring injury. If you have both corners out, Calvin Ridley, Kyle Pitts, Russell Gage, even as a deep option, all getting some love. I know a lot of people probably dumped Gage after that week 1. I do want to see what he can at least do. Him, Davis, I don't want to have too much of a let's not give this team the credit that it should in terms of fantasy, because I expect them to be in a lot of poor sort of scoring situations. Opposing teams, I'm just expecting to put the Falcons into pass operation mode really quickly in a lot of these games this year. I don't expect a lot out of this defense, but offensively, I think this is a big get right game for Calvin Ridley, right outside my top 5. But if Ryan is hopefully able to stay upright, Dallas only allowed 1 sack to this Tampa Bay front. Atlanta hopefully can do the same, although there is that meme going around of Matt Ryan face down after a sack in week 1. So hopefully we're not really seeing too much of that going forward. But both, Calvin Ridley, Kyle Pitts, both top 6 for me at the respective positions, 8 targets apiece in week 1. I'm hoping to see a breakout performance for Kyle Pitts and a bounce back to elite production, hopefully, in Calvin Ridley. Again, this is a player that we think could have 180 or more targets on the season if everything kind of goes the right way. And I think there's a possibility for that going the right way here. Otherwise, Hayden Hurst, no. Russell Gage, again, very deep option, but hopefully not have to do so. Cordova Patterson as well. Davis, I think if you're just I have to start a second running back and is my best guy, hoping for some receiving work out of him. 5 more receptions would be able to do a lot for his fantasy day, because I'm not expecting a lot to go down on the ground. Of course, this is football, so a 70-yard carry incoming for Mike Davis. Moving on to the Tampa Bay side, Brady you're starting, and the receivers, I think they're all top 24 options. Godwin and Brown especially. Evans not far behind, but his inconsistency is a detriment. Hopefully that they want to just kind of stick it to the Falcons and keep this game offensively competitive. If the Falcons don't do so, I think there's going to be a sort of a possibility for at least one of these receivers to have more of a dismal day than you're hoping for. Mike Evans could have a blow-up game of 120 yards and a score. Could just be as easily a repeat of week 1, and that's kind of always been his issue. His huge games outshine his terrible games. He just has a lot of inconsistency, which is really the big problem for him. The one big thing, undeniably, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is going to be who is the starting running back, because currently they're all listed as starters, and that does nothing to help us, Bruce Arians. All very risk-reward type guys, all outside, I believe, my top 30. The one I'm currently leaning with is Leonard Fournette, 1 spot ahead of Ronald Jones, because I'm basically a coward and we have no idea. If you need to start one of these guys as a flex, you're hoping they score, you're hoping they get the touches, because Ronald Jones disappeared after playing 6 snaps in week 1. So we have no idea what they want to do with him. So if you're in a spot that you're stuck with one of these guys, I technically prefer Fournette right now. Eventually, Giovanni Bernard will get more acclimated to the Tampa Bay system. He was kind of, he was really reporting to Brady when he was on the field to say, hey, where do you want me? Where am I going? What's the play? All yada, yada, yada. So that's something to still be in consideration. Does Giovanni Bernard start becoming a receiving threat? Does that hurt guys like Rob Gronkowski? Rob Gronkowski just had his best game in week 1 since his New England days. Top 12 option for me, but there is the risk of him being a dud. He shows up in big games. He shows up when the lights are on. This is a random 4:00 game where they're favored by 12.5 points. So if Gronkowski does not show up, I at least say that there's some credit to that. But I do like him as a top 12 option. You're trying to chase points. You're trying to chase touchdowns. And I believe the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to put up quite a few of those on Sunday. I would also be starting the Bucs DST. We're on to one of, I believe, the more fun games of the week because I want to see what this team looks like when they're playing a little more of a competitive opponent, which would be the Minnesota and Arizona game. Not my favorite game of the week, but there is just all these games. Every single one besides one that we're talking about today is all 50-point over-unders. There is a lot of points that's going to be scored in the 4 o'clock and later sort of situations. If you're down or up after 1 o'clock, those fantasy matchups are going to be changing. That is just 100% what's going to be happening. But starting with Minnesota, which I have no idea how to spell because I spell it incorrectly in my notes every single time, and I'm noticing it today. Somehow I have 2 S's and 2 T's this time. Good on me. But no 2 N's, whatever. Kirk Cousins. I've been fighting with him to be in my top 12 all week. Currently just outside of it. I prefer Jalen Hurts in that San Francisco matchup. But if you have a good feeling about what Kirk Cousins is going to do, I like both receivers in this game, and Dalvin Cook is always going to be a slam dunk option. But if you like what Minnesota is doing, I have no problem with you saying that Kirk Cousins is a top 12 option. It would not surprise me if he finishes as such. I love to see the pace of play from them. I love to see the heavy pass totals like they had in week 1 against the Cincinnati Bengals. If they can do this again, if they give a huge workload to Dalvin Cook again, he had 30 plus in week 1. This is going to be another exciting game. I'm just kind of curious, and we'll get to what the Arizona side. It's really the defense. It's going to be a matter of that. It would be my favorite game of the week if not for the Chargers-Dallas game, like I said before. But Jefferson and Adam Thielen, both top 15 options for me. I still lean Justin Jefferson to Adam Thielen. He just finds ways to score, and scoring is so much of what we think about players. So if Thielen off to a hot start already, had 2 touchdowns in week 1. If he shows up again here in week 2, well, a little bit of in the draft season, I was sort of avoiding this player. I've become wrong, and that's completely fine. If he's able to just go out and score, on average once per week, that's an excellent fantasy player and someone that is very valuable to have. And it's very something that I'm just going to be wrong on if he just continues that, amazing pace. And there's one more player to talk about because I do think that it was very interesting what happened in week 1, which was KJ Osborne. 9 targets, heavy snap counts just behind Jefferson and Thielen. Is he in line for a all or nothing type flex? Now, the problem is, week 2, you shouldn't be sort of looking at these guys. Let me take a look real quick where I got Osborne ranked. Because I think this is one of the more interesting players. He's a guy that was basically just a special teams player all of 2020. It comes out and is an actual fantasy asset in week 1. 52 right now, right behind DJ Chark and Tim Patrick in that Jacksonville-Denver game. I do think he's just, we have to put the spotlight on him. I want to see what exactly he can do going forward. If he just disappears from the offense, it's understandable, but he's definitely behind Cousins, Jefferson, and Thielen. But without Irv Smith for the season, and Chris Herndon did not show up in week 1, mostly because he got traded very late in the season. It's understandable that he has to take a little while to get really up to speed with this offense. But if KJ Osborne becomes that 4th option, that's interesting as a flex idea. It's interesting when we get towards the buys and injuries start piling up and things are going to happen to make him more of a, hey, we should be paying attention to players like this. There's a guy on the other side, Christian Kirk. That's another sort of situation, or really any of the Arizona receivers. But something to just keep an eye on. We're going to move on to the Arizona Cardinals. And one big thing for them is this Cardinals defense legit? Because they came out and just really shut down, I thought, a very strong Tennessee offense. Between J.J. Watt, Chandler Jones, Budda Baker, Isaiah Simmons, is there enough talent here to be hey, we are making a statement to be a good defense? And that will be the inclination, because I think this offense is going to be one that you're going to have opposing teams want to be involved in your fantasy lineups. But if this defense is strong enough, like we just saw in week 1, had Derrick Henry back-to-back stops at the goal line, Julio Jones can't come down with a touchdown in the end zone. It's going to be something to watch, and I'm very curious to see what happens, because Kyler Murray, he is the consensus QB1. He is my QB1, consensus QB1. It's a very far drop to see, the 100 something, almost 200 rankers on Fantasy Pros, almost like I'd say about like 80 to 90 of them have Kyler Murray as their QB1, and if not, most of them is his QB2. His average is that he's the QB1. It's a statement. He is the guy this week at quarterback. Dr. Hopkins, yay, we don't talk about him. But the other three, Christian Kirk, Rondale Moore, and AJ Green, all for me wide receiver 4 or lower options. I currently lean Kirk. Doesn't mean am I leaning too much of that because he scored? Possibly. But Kirk scored twice in week 1. Rondale Moore, most yards per reception, and Green had the most targets of the 3. So that's an issue for us because if they're spreading the ball around, they're spreading on what makes these guys possibly good for fantasy. If you combine it all into one guy, this is great. But with it all being spread out like it was, that's an issue for us. It's hard to determine what's going to be the correct guy to go out and pick up and plug in. None of them are very much start sort of options. All wide receiver 4 or lower. Not really guys that really need to, really fit into your lineup if you don't want to. But again, Kirk is my favorite of the 3 guys. Chase Edmonds, top 24 for me. James Conner, I need to see a little bit more receiving work from the change for the ordering these two. Again, Chase Edmonds was my favorite on in terms of points per game basis. James Conner was always seeing like a glaring value in the draft season, but no targets in week 1, 16 carries. If he's going to just have a pure rushing workload, unless he's scoring, unless they give it that he's, producing on a good per carry measure, it's not really something I'm going to be overtly favoring in terms of fantasy because we're looking at full and half PPR mostly on this show. Moving on, though, it is definitely my favorite game of the week. Dallas Cowboys versus the LA Chargers. Chargers favored by 3, 55 point over under. This is the game of the week, undeniably. On both sides, you can kind of make this one really quick, which is just say kind of start everyone. Anyone you would want to start should be in your lineups. One big thing over on the Dallas side, without Gallup for a few weeks, does Schultz repeat as a better tight end option than Blake Jarwin? Is Cedric Wilson someone we should be kind of paying attention to? Dak, my quarterback, too. Zach, top 10. He's a slam dunk, but a lot of the guys are a slam dunk. I love the top end for the running backs. Some of my top 12 guys this week, McCaffrey, Cook, and Kamara is going to be up there, but Austin Eckler in my top 5. Nick Chubb in that Houston game, I think, is going to get a ton of work. Derrick Henry against Seattle. Aaron Jones, and I think a bounce back sort of revenge game here after week 1, thrashing it against the Detroit Lions on Monday Night Football. Gibson was in my top 10. He's locked in. That game didn't go to fruition in that regard. Ezekiel Elliott and DeAndre Swift. I love the top. Even in Najee Harris, and I think a bounce back spot against Vegas, and David Montgomery, my star of the week against the Cincinnati Bengals. This is just a tough week for running backs at the top. They're all in amazing spots. So Zeke, I'm not downgrading him in any sort of regard. There's just a lot of guys in really good matchups, and we kind of just want to see it exactly out of Zeke because I think they can just do just as well through the air and just like, hey, we're just going to pass, and if Zeke is a beneficiary of that, cool. All things considered, we're back to what we thought with Ezekiel Elliott. But Cooper, and I said Cooper and Lamb, both top 12 for me. Cedric Wilson shouldn't be an option here in week 2, just like we saw with the Arizona receivers and with KJ Osborne over there in the Minnesota Vikings. With your healthy rosters, no buys, but let's keep an eye on him, especially with, again, Gallup out for at least a few weeks. And then Schultz and Jarwin are splitting enough that you're taking stabs for a touchdown in this one. If there were just one option, if they were just saying it's just Jarwin or just Schultz, I think you got a locked in top 12 tight end. But as of right now, I do lean Schultz to Jarwin. Schultz for me is in, I believe, my top. Yes, he is in my top 16, right behind Gerald Everett and Jonnu Smith. If Smith is out, he'll move up a little bit on that regard. But I'm starting over Mike Gesicki, Adam Troutwin, Blake Jarwin, and Austin Hooper. We're on to the Chargers side. And again, just as lovely on this side as well. One big thing is especially going to be is Austin Eckler going to just see any targets? Justin Herbert's in for a massive game. I think Eckler's in for a massive game. Both top 5, their respective positions for me. Keenan Allen is in my top 3. Turned out a 100-yard receiving game like he did against the Washington football team. I think against the Cowboys, who got thrashed by multiple different players over on that Thursday night game. Allen and Eckler, this is the big, hey, we are here. Love this game for just those 3 especially. But Eckler not seeing any targets in week 1. If he can just pick up even one, that would be lovely. He did get 7 red zone carries, though, in that week 1 matchup. So let's see if he can repeat that as well. I love the 7 carries in the red zone and getting targets through the air. That might be a little too aggressively favoring him and wanting him to do well, but I'm a big Austin Eckler guy this year. Mike Williams. Now, we have been fooled by him before. He has done big things in week ones and yesteryears. Big week one in 2020, 26% target share, though, here in week one. Allen, Williams, and Cook account for actually 70% of the target share of the entire team. But again, Austin Eckler was not accounted for in that, as he did not receive a target. But it's something to take a look at. Mike Williams, for me, if we're going to be looking at receiver starts of the week, I believe he is the guy, and that's not really any sort of surprise. Anyone and everyone is going to be telling you to start him. My wide receiver 26 right now on the week. And I'm considering pushing up him even higher. But, man, with Antonio Brown as my wide receiver 21, it just shows how strong the receivers are this week at the position. And I don't want to get too overzealous because Mike Williams has disappointed us in spots that we thought he was going to be a big beneficiary of the weekly matchup. And hopefully he kind of comes through for us in this one, though. Jared Cook's going to be my top 12. Another one, possible star of the week there at tight end. It probably is. Tight end just being kind of what it is. And oddly enough, it's actually probably Robert Tonyan. We'll talk about him a little bit later. But 6 more snaps than Donald Parham in week one. But Parham only had 1 target. 10 routes ran of his 41 snaps compared to Cook's 28 routes on 47 snaps per player, profile.com. If they're splitting the snap workload, that's one thing. They're splitting the targets is another. And Cook in a spot that Gronk, again, had his best game since the New England days. I think is a top 12 option. He is the streaming tight end. Robert Tonyan, not really a streamer, unless he was dropped after that week 1 performance, and that would be very silly to me. But Cook, if you got him out on your waiver wire, again, some players, I'm going to be starting Jared Cook over this week. I'd be starting over Rob Gronkowski, Dallas Goedert, and Jonnu Smith. Right behind Tyler Higbee, I would have started Logan Thomas, though. Like I said, rankings up every Tuesday, updated through the week. Thomas I've had in my top 10 since it came out on Tuesday. Thomas over Cook would have been my move. Moving on to the Tennessee and Seattle game, another game that could have really been, the game of the week. And we're even talking about the big primetime game on Sunday Night Football. But Tennessee versus Seattle. Seattle favored by 5.5 points, 54 point over under. One big thing out of Seattle is going to be a team collective. I want to see more sustained drives out of them. They were either punting early or they were going for the deep ball, and it didn't really lead to sustained drives. I want to see what this team looks like when they're not just kind of, let's say, get lucky a little bit. When you're having big touchdown plays happen multiple times in a game, are they exploiting the defense? Are they getting up too much to, Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf and all the sort of regard? But something to see. Start Russell Wilson. I actually have him ranked ahead of Josh Allen. I think this is an excellent spot if they are going to exploit the deep ball once again, if that is going to be their new outlook for what their offensive measures are going to be. I think they can do it again here against Tennessee, who are allowing a lot of that in week 1. Chris Carson, high running back 2 option. He is the last guy pretty much in that I'm fairly, very confident at, with him at running back 15 for me. Damian Harris against New York Jets at running back 16. I think that's real RB2 status. Then Chris Carson, if you got him as your second running back, you are extremely happy with him and whoever else you are starting. Love him in this week. I want to see how stick with him after that 100 total yards in week 1 with no Rashad Penny hurt on, I believe, his second carry into the game in week 1. How much more work does Chris Carson possibly get added to his plate? Does DJ Dallas or any of the other guys come in to step in to take touches away? That would be the only concern for us, but I do like him against this Tennessee defense. Moving on to the receivers. Now, was Tyler Lockett able to pull in some home run type touchdowns? Of course, and we've seen this out of him before, and he's had big blow up games. We get one here in week 1 against the Colts. But Tennessee allowed the second most points allowed in week 1, around 14 yards per reception, and had 5 plays of 20 or more yards. There is a possibility that the deep ball is on the table once again. Metcalf, the preferred target of the 2 players. They are both in my, top 15, top 20, depends where I got Lockett at. Top 15, right behind Terry McLaurin, who had an amazing game over there on the Thursday Night Football game. But having both be average depth of target in week 1 of over 15 yards, that's not something I'm expecting once again. But if Tennessee is just going to allow them to do so, obviously Seattle will oblige to that measure. And I think they're going to possibly try and do anything they can to take advantage of this Tennessee defense to win this one at home. Don't want to get too little ahead of ourselves on Gerald Everett. Near split in snaps with Will Dissly. He just happened to score. That being said, there is a good chance for him to score here in week 2. Not anything that I want to say is a locked-in situation. We don't want to be talking in definitives. Touchdowns are fluky. Do not account for them on a weekly basis unless it's one of the big guys. I mean, I don't believe Christian McCaffrey scored in week 1, and that's a guy we expect to score on a weekly basis. So just something to account for. On the Tennessee side, one big thing is another one. Whole team. Can this team bounce back? Going back to the well with this passing game of Tannehill, Brown, and Julio. One of the worst offensive performances of Tannehill's time with the Tennessee Titans. Expected it'll be a little bit slow with Julio Jones joining. But another, huge point total here of like all the rest of the 4 o'clock or later games. The 11th quarterback rating that I have for him currently on the week, possibly going to be a too low sort of ranking if everything sort of shakes right for him. It's really just a matter of how much did those 6 sacks on the day just kill drives, kill confidence, and put them into a poor spot for them to make a good stand in that Arizona game. Seattle here, I'm hoping to have a little bit of a better showing out of those 3 major passing players from A.J. Brown is a favored guy for me over Julio. Top 12 option for Brown, top 20 option for Julio. And Derrick Henry, stopping him twice on the goal line and back-to-back plays, that is just strange to see. This is a great spot for him almost any week. Definitely, if you're changing the tune on these players, I think that's a very silly thing to do. And let's not have one week just affect too much of what I think is a very hard to cover and plan for offense in the Tennessee Titans. So I hope that the Titans can take advantage of Seattle's defense and come up with some fantasy points, because there wasn't much to go around in that regard last Sunday for sure. Moving on to this Sunday night football game, Kansas City versus the Baltimore Ravens. Kansas City favored by 3.5 points, 55-point over-under on the contest. Kansas City is pretty easy. You start the main 3, and then we have to talk about Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because Mahomes is top 5, Kelsey is 1, and Tyreek Hill's top 5, and we don't have to spend any more time on them. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I'm a little worried. One big thing for him, is he a matchup dependent running back? Because so much of what they do is really the other guys. I'm worried that if he doesn't pick up kind of the crumbs and gets into the end zone himself, is he really a dependent player of them being ahead or them being in comfortable spots? Cleveland Browns defense, I think, is going to be a very strong defensive unit. Kind of an odd thing. He only had 3 touches in the first half of last week's game and then got more involved in the second half. By that point, he wasn't able to accumulate enough stats for us to be really happy with his final score. But if he's going to be a matchup type guy, I'm a little worried on that regard. Upcoming schedule, the Chargers, Eagles, Bills, and the Washington football team. Not an overly great schedule from him. Low RB2 option for me right now. I'm hoping to be a high RB2 option in the weeks coming up. But I still need to see a little bit more out of him. And this is not particularly a great matchup against a team that gave up touchdowns to Josh Jacobs, but didn't give up a lot of yards. So I'm a little worried about it's going to go down on the ground for his regard. Moving on to that Baltimore Ravens side, though, do we get any sort of consistency in any regard out of all these players outside of Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson, who are going to be must starts every single week? So since we're going to skip over Jackson, you're for sure playing. We love that. Touch totals from week 1. We're going to talk about these running backs. Williams, 12 total touches, but 3 came after the halftime whistle. And Murray, 10 total touches, but 7 came after halftime. Hard to trust either of them right now outside of a desperation scenario. I am currently leaning Murray over Williams, but it's really not something I'm going to be hanging my hat on as too much of a certainty. This is Williams' first game as an NFL player ever. He's not a rookie, but he's basically a rookie. And Latavius Murray was literally signed by that team 10 days ago, if that by now. So it's very tough to say what really went down in that, on that Monday night game for Baltimore with these running backs. Hopefully get more clarification who's going to be the main back. Is there going to be anyone who catches passage, which we haven't even seen out of any running back in this running back room over the last few years? So it's hard to trust either of them really. And then we move on to other guys who are tough to trust. I do want to have some confidence in Marquise Brown. We'll save on him for right now because we have to talk about Sami Watkins real quick. Sami Watkins has shown up in the week 1 for 3 straight years. Here's his scores. His stat lines for the last 3 seasons. 4 for 96 this year, 7 for 82 in a score in 2020, and 9 for 198 in 3 in 2019. He was with the Chiefs, I believe, at the time. Those were all season bests for each respective season. For me, ranking him in the receiver 40s, 50s. Man, where do I even have Watkins? Receiver 61. I think that's even a little too low. I'm going to move him up to the 50s at least. So he's going to come around like wide receiver 55. But man, that's really the long and the short of it. He has really great week 1s and then he disappears. And I don't want to talk anymore about Sami Watkins because I don't think he deserves to be talked about. But Brown, on the other hand, I want to trust him. I want to trust him in this important game. I want to trust this as a springboard that we can have a receiver until Rashad Bateman, because hopefully when Bateman is here, we have a receiving group of, Bateman and Brown and Andrews, and they're going to be passing. Everything looks great because when we get into situations like we did on Monday, where they're forced to pass, they're not able to be successful on the ground outside of Lamar Jackson, what he does in his very crazy athleticism that he has, that we get into very sticky situations where they're not very confident what they're going to do through the air. So hopefully Brown just outside the top 36 for me, but I want this to be a springboard that he can be in your flexes and possible be a comfortable wide receiver 3 or even wide receiver 2. I would love that. But I do like him. I want to have very much confidence in him going forward. Want this to be the game that he shows up for us. And I think in one of the more high profile games of the week in terms of the NFL, maybe not from a total overall fantasy standpoint, but if he's going to show up, I think this is the one he would do so in. Last game of the week, Detroit versus Green Bay. Going to be starting with the Detroit side. One big thing is there anyone to care about outside of the running backs and Hawkinson? Jared Goff, I am ranking him this week. I don't believe I did in week 1. Only in 2 quarterback leagues only. I don't want to hold too much regard against the Green Bay Packers, but 25% touchdown rate that Winston did have against them in week 1, especially with no, Michael Thomas or Traquan Smith. Near top 20 option for me. Again, only in Superflex or 2 QB leagues, though, is even going to be talked about. DeAndre Swift, top 10 option, rather running back. Jamal Williams, top 30. Gets one of the softest run defenses that were in the NFL in 2020. They really sell out to stop the pass. They have a good pass defense, and especially with Jair Alexander trying to shut down lead receivers on the team. I don't know if he's going to follow Hawkinson. I don't believe so. That would be interesting, but there's not a receiver we care about on this team at the moment anyway, especially with it took 57 targets for them to even have receivers hit 3 or 4 targets in that game against San Francisco. So there's not really much I can really hold on that there's a lead guy that we want to look at. So that's really anything. Do we have anyone to care about outside the running backs and Hawkinson? But looking for Swift to make a statement game here. 54% share targets of Hawk, Swift, and Williams in the game that hopefully you can have a little bit focused more on Swift. If Jamal Williams gets in there and gets work, cool. But that's not what we want to talk about. We want to talk about Swift as a top 12 option. We want him to have a big showing here and be the lead back. Again, what makes him valuable is not the carries, it's the receptions. So if he's receiving like he did in week 1, that's great. We love that. We want that here again. And we think as a situation where they're going to be able to do a little bit easier time defensively, because this team was down 38-10 with 6 minutes gone in the third quarter and picked up 23 points in the final 20 minutes. That's not something I think is going to be a sustainable game plan going forward. But if they get into a massive garbage time situation in a 10.5 point spread against Green Bay, that's great for us because Hawkinson is my favorite non-elite tight end option. And honestly, if Darren Waller wasn't possibly getting another 15 or higher targets, I can see ranking over him. George Kittle, I love every single week as well against Philadelphia. But Hawkinson right now, Mark Andrews was my lead guy in week 1, but here in week 2, both him, Pitts, and Andrews, again, they're looking like great options. And I do think it's going to be, again, the Hawkinson show and these 2 running backs. And look at that. We got through all the games in under 40 minutes. This is good. I'm trying to speed things up a little bit. not talk about 7,000 players, especially guys that you don't care about and that we don't have to care about, and we talk about the most important stuff we can. But with that, we're going to start wrapping up the show. Again, if this is the first time or last time you've joined us, I appreciate you spending your time here with me on the GR Weekly Show. We're going to be back here again on Monday, recapping all the week's events, Wednesday and Friday as well at 7:30. But again, subscribe if you have not done so. There are 4 different shows on this channel. You have me 3 days a week on the GR Weekly show. You have me with John June on Wednesdays at 5:30 on Off the Grid. Tuesdays and Thursdays, you got Gary and the crew doing all the IDP stuff for getting defensive. And then on Saturdays, you got the slate when they're breaking down all the DFS stuff, trying to win you some money, trying to get you them dollars. And we like the dollars here. But for GR and all the people here at Gridiron Ratings, I have Matt McCarthy, Senior Redraft Analyst for GridironRatings.com. And good luck in your games this week.